Much love to everybody. I'm gonna tell you this. The fucking bots didn't get to it because I paid for extra fucking cocksucking coverage. Don't fucking play that shit with me.
The Sockjig Sneaker Podcast. Took him to the paint. Welcome to episode 51 of the Sockjig Sneaker Podcast. I'm your host, Sockjig. You can follow me on Twitter at Sockjig and on Instagram as well. In this episode, I tell the story about how I got the scoop about the reseller who got 38 fakes of Jordan 1s from StockX and gave a deposition in the Nike versus StockX court case. I also have a couple shorter topics that I'm just calling odds and ends, where I talk about Mac attacks, Joe Grondin leaving New Balance, Adidas and Beyonce, and Kanye watching movies at home. Then the co-main event of this episode is the delicate genius of Jerry Lorenzo and the delicate genius of Tom Sachs. So it's a good episode. I appreciate you all tuning in and listening and always supporting me. And people have been asking me, when am I going to drop socks again? They're on the way to me. They'll probably drop around mid-April or so. However, I do have a few leftovers from recent drops that I've put up on my site right now. If you missed out on recent drops, you can go to shop.sockjig.com. The password is delicate. These include the white and black pairs of the buy low, sell for more than pay socks, the game is the game in cream and green, and very limited pairs of the recent golden yellow and Seahawks colorways. The stock is limited because these are just some of the holdbacks that I usually hold back in case someone's pair gets lost in the mail or has quality control issues. So once again, shop.sockjig.com. Password is delicate. So go cop if you missed them previously. If you already bought them, new ones should be on the way pretty soon. In both cases, I always appreciate your support, so thank you very much. But first, we'll get to on-feet, pickups, and skips and misses. On feet lately has been the Ice Studios Gel Kano 14s and the Joe Freshgoods 990 V3. The Joe Freshgoods shoes I bought recently from GOAT because I saw that the resale price on them was about $260 in my size. Before, the price had been around $340 or so I would always skip them. So I saw the price and I was like, now's my chance. It's either now or never, so I copped. So those are the two shoes I took with me on a trip to Disneyland with the family. I was looking for comfort, not heat, so I didn't want to wear Dunks or Jordan 1s all day. And as I was walking around there, the TikToks are true. Lots of people were wearing Panda Dunks. Didn't see that many Air Force 1s, but I did see lots of uncomfortable shoes on feet. I can't imagine walking around all day in Jordan 4s or Doc Martens. In terms of pickups lately, there's been quite a few since I haven't updated since middle of February or so it's like over a month of pickups. I got the Ama Manier 12s in the white colorway. I don't have them in hand yet. I got to pick them up from my mailbox in the US. I got the Mischief red boots. Like I said on Twitter, I have the buyers or mores. Probably have to wait another 3-4 weeks for shipping on those. So when I get them in hand, it's either just going to be a novelty shoe that I'll wear around Halloween or I'll get rid of it. Also got the Supreme Bacons, the rainbow ones. That was another cop where I was like, if I don't buy them now, I'll probably regret it later, so might as well cop. Also from Nike CA, I picked up a pair of Air Max 1s in the Safari white colorway. That was a women's release, and there was a pair of women's 13.5, men's 12 sitting on the site, so I copped those. And they're all leather, so it hasn't been Air Max 1 and that's all leather in a while, it feels like. And one of the things I did not like about it, it's got these wax laces, which are just a pain to unwind and loosen up. And I don't know, the wax laces really soured me on the shoe, and they didn't come with another pair of laces, so I got to look around for another pair of laces. Also picked up a couple pairs of the white cement 3s. One pair I had exclusive access on Sneakers app, and it wasn't working. And then a couple hours later, it did work. So I was happy to have those, so to at least have guaranteed a pair before the drop. And then for the actual drop, I got 2 pairs from 2 different raffles from Canadian sites. All 3 pairs I got were very good. There's no quality control issues on any of my pair. The pattern looked fine, no glue stains or anything like that. So I'm going to keep 2, and I gave 1 to my brother. And I'm still chasing the OG, the 88s. I got the red stripe, and I got these new reimagined ones, but I feel like I'll probably have to wait another 5+ years to get the actual Nike Air 88s OG retro at this point. I also got the Jordan 4 SB. I thought I had an L on those, but I got a last second win. So I'm looking forward to trying them on. I also don't have those in hand yet. Still on the way to me. I also got a pair of the Action Bronson Baklava New Balance 990 V6 sneakers from his site. I was lucky to grab a pair. My order number was in the 3,000s or so, and Shopify order numbers usually start with 1,000. So I'm guessing there were 2,000 or so pairs on his site because it did sell out soon after I caught my pair. Then the New Balance site had a drop a week later this past Friday, and that was over in like 2 minutes with, like 80,000 people trying to buy 100 pairs or whatever it was. New Balance site should probably queue it and go to raffles or do the Shopify first come first serve type of drops. And this is the debate that came up with Travis sneakers, where it's raffles versus first come first serve. For an average buyer, these first come first serve drops with the question and stuff like that is going to be tough. For everyone else like us who are into sneakers and online all the time, we are used to it. We know to be prepared. We know to have, autofills with credit card ready. We know there's going to be a question and something to research and look up. So it rewards the people who are ready and researched and, have some history of Action Bronson. The add to cart question on the Action Bronson site was fill in the blank, fuck that's blank. And if you know Action Bronson, he's got a show called Fuck That's Delicious. So if his site just had a raffle, most likely I would have taken an L and moved on. For skips, I did skip the Dornbecker Vomero, the one that people have liked, which has shot up in price. And I think everyone who got it in hand and posted about it and said, look how great this shoe is in hand, is why the price really did skyrocket. It's a nice shoe. It's a loud shoe. It only dropped on Sneakers app and in some, Shoe Palace retail stores and stuff like that. I'm glad people like it. I'm glad it's having a moment. I'm glad that kid is getting his due while all these resale apps are making money off this charity shoe. Also, a skip for me is going to be the Air Max Big Bubble. I don't know. From the looks of it, the bubble looks a little too big for me. Maybe I'm just too used to the small window. I get that from a historical aspect. It's cool because it came out first, and for the hardcore collectors, it's a nice drop, and that's what Air Max Day should be about. But I don't know, the midsole looks higher because the bag, I guess, is bigger, the airbag that's in there, which makes it kind of look like an Air Max 90. I'm not a huge shape guy. You know how people are always like, oh, the shape. But I get it in this instant. The shape looks a little bit off to me. I have the red Air Max one from 2017. I have the one from 2014 with the Volt sole as well too. So that's why I'm like, I might as well just skip these because I could just go to those two. Also a skip for me are these Kith Adidas Samba Clarks shoes. I like them. It's not something I'd wear very often. I feel like if you own a cardigan, you'd want these. The price is very high, and I'm guessing that's because it's a triple collab and it's a crepe sole. Anytime a collaborator's name is going to be on a sneaker, it's going to usually require them to pay a license fee. So that usually adds $15 or so to the price. For example, the Gatorade Jordan 1s were $15 higher than the normal Jordan 1 price because they had to pay Gatorade to put their logo on the shoe. I saw that it looked like it was very limited, and then Ronnie announced that they're going to do a pre-order because there was a lot of demand for it. That's fine. It's good for the people who wear cardigans and missed out. But Kith has been doing this ultra limited pattern for the last little while, if you haven't noticed, with the Kith 993 as well too. It seemed like there was 1,000 or so pairs of those. Whatever the minimum order quantity is for New Balance is what they did. And maybe at Asics too, those EX89 and the other Asics that dropped, it seemed like they were very low. And to me, Kith seems like they're too big for this. They're too big for 1,000 pair drop. Kith is doing these super limited drops, I assume, to create energy. Energy is the industry term for hype because saying the word hype is kind of uncouth, I guess. So, Nike famously calls it NRG instead of, the full word energy. And I don't know, Kith seems a little bit too big for this because they're opening more and more stores up, but now they're dropping fewer sneakers. I don't know, they could do the same drop with 2,000 pairs, 5,000 pairs, 10,000 pairs, but that's not what they want. They want to create energy. So that, that's the misses category that I do here. The Kith 993 was a miss on the draw on the app. Also missed out on the Jordan 85 black and white. I feel like I want to go back for them because they're like 340-ish in my size. But this year I've been trying to just kind of move on from L's and just focus on the ones I do have. Also missed on the Tiffany Air Force One. Like I said previously, it's not a shoe for me, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to enter a raffle and try to flip it. So I'd only really entered the main EQL raffle and the livestock raffle. I did not go all out. I just entered the easy raffles. And they're holding up resale wise. Of course, that doesn't mean a shoe is good because it resells. It just means people want them. Also missing out on these Cortez 95 drops, these Air Max 95 drops. Those are releasing in EMEA countries. EMEA is an acronym for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I joked that the Cortez slogan is rules the world, but it's not ship the world. But overall, it's a very good collab. Someone with an organic following, collaborating on a model that people like that has been modified a bit, but familiar enough, and releasing it regionally to the people that actually put him over, which is basically what I was calling for in the previous episodes. What's interesting is the guy, Clint, who's behind the Cortez brand, was the one sued by Nike because they thought in the marketplace it would be confusing with Cortez, which Nike owns. And Nike actually won, and the Clint guy had to pay like £3,000 or whatever the fee was. But seems like he got that money back with this collab. They also did a New York City drop where they had a few hundred pairs in a pop-up. You saw the videos online where people running to the store trying to cop to flip. And, New York City put hustling on the map. You can't stop them from that. So even if it's a guy that people haven't heard of, they sensed enough that there's money to be made. So the people ran there to get them. What I always like is when Upskill Crack on Instagram will post the same photo before the people are running with the shoe in his hand. And you could tell that he's not running to grab that shoe. But the point of that was to create energy. But it has to be balanced with this need for more first come, first serve drops, but also, security and overdoing it like that crushed DC skate shop with the Jordan 4s. So I have this kind of thoughts on online versus offline, and I'll probably save that for a future pod. StockX was in the news, StockX and Nike with their lawsuit going on. Apparently, StockX had sold 38 pairs of fake sneakers to a single buyer, which was detailed in a court document where the buyer, or the reseller as he was called, his name was redacted. But it turned out I actually knew this guy and he told me some details. And so I tweeted it out, it made some news, and it got aggregated. So let me tell you the story of what happened and how that came out. I won't go into the details of the reseller story itself. I was trying to actually get him on this podcast for an interview, but timing didn't work out for both me and for him. So maybe we'll try again and I'll get him on for the next one. But to give some setup for the story, there was an updated court document in the Nike and StockX lawsuit where they were arguing about what can be allowed into discovery. And they talked about how a reseller bought 38 pairs from StockX and those 38 pairs were fake. And that Nike actually visited him and inspected them and confirmed they're fake. It didn't go into any details of how they actually confirmed it. And that the reseller got into contact with StockX and was able to get a refund for them. And it was in the court documents because Nike wanted to know what StockX does with returns of fake product. What do they do with them? How do they confirm? What documents do they create? Where do they go? They wanted all that kind of evidence introduced into discovery because they think it's pertinent to the case of how StockX can't be trusted when it comes to authenticating sneakers. In the court stuff, StockX actually pushed back. That said that it's actually privileged. And the latest update is that the judge agreed with StockX that those documents cannot be allowed into discovery. And a quick sidebar about the case as well, too. Just a reminder, the case is really about NFTs. And if StockX can create NFTs on physical products that they have in a vault, Nike is saying that is confusing to the NFT marketplace. And they want to be the one to make NFTs on their own products, on JPEGs or JPEGs that represent real sneakers. What Nike wants to do with NFTs and sneakers going forward is kind of unknown at this point. All we know is what they want to do with the .swoosh program, which I've just described as like this online coloring book with blockchain. Maybe their real goal is to have all sneakers be authenticated via blockchain, and NFTs are the way to do it. And when this case first started in, last year, interest in NFTs was way higher than it is right now. In 2023, the hardcores care about it, but everyone else, no one really gives a shit about StockX NFTs. No one really gives a shit about .swoosh either. So back to the case, Nike is basically saying StockX can't authenticate the sneaker that they're putting in their vault that they're creating an NFT for, so they shouldn't be allowed to create NFTs for it. That's their, one of their claims in their case. StockX's defense is basically, this is all protected under first sale doctrine, meaning I can sell what I've bought. I bought this sneaker, I put it in the vault, I can sell it. I'm just selling it via NFT now. For sale doctrine, it's like, you have the right to sell what you bought. Imagine if Sony came to you saying you can't sell this Sony TV on Facebook Marketplace because only Sony can sell Sony TVs. So anyways, that's a quick background on the case. In terms of how this all came out, Brendan Dunn was the first to tweet about the details of the case and about the reseller who had 38 pairs of fakes from StockX, and he called him a snitch in his tweet. All I'll say is, companies have no soul. If you've been wronged by a company, do whatever you got to do to get your money back. And then later in the day, my buddy VNDSNK sent me the full document that I then tweeted out and gave more details on, other than just the snitch tweet that Dunn had posted, and kind of what I outlined just earlier. So later in the day, I get a DM from someone I talked to in the DMs before, and he says, "Hey, I see that you're tweeting about me at StockX." After being like, "Hey, what are you talking about?" I kind of realized what he's saying is that he's basically the reseller who gave the deposition in court, whose name is redacted. So we talk a bit, and he tells me that he was buying the sneakers to hold, that he bought University Blue, Hyper Royal, and Mocha ones in the spring of 2022, and 38 of the 60-ish were fake. He couldn't get a response from StockX, so he posted it on Instagram, and that's how he finally got a response. Evidently, Nike saw this and got in touch with him. And just a sidebar on this, people were in my replies saying, who would even do this? People do this. I did this with Goat Storage. Go back to, an old episode where I talk about how I would buy Dunks and stuff and put them in Goat Storage and sell them 3 months later. You could do this with most good Jordan ones at the time. You can't exactly do it right now, but back in the day, most good Jordan ones you could hold for a little while. You could have bought every Spider-Man origin story Jordan 1 for the resale price of $300, $350, or whatever it was, and hold them till now and sell them for $600, $700. So in the DMs, I asked him a bunch of other questions about what did Nike say or what they do, and a lot of that stuff he couldn't talk about. But then I asked him, can I actually tweet about these sneakers? Because that was the part that was interesting to me, because people out there are feeling like every sneaker that StockX authenticates could possibly be fake, and that's not exactly the case with, uncommon sneakers. But definitely is the case with certain sneakers that you just don't trust. I've talked about in the past, I wouldn't trust buying a Travis 1 on StockX. So I asked him if I could tweet about it, that I was just going to tweet the facts, that it was these 3 sneakers. And then I followed up and said that, these are the sneakers that dipped in spring of 2022 and most likely dipped because the market was flooded with good quality fakes and StockX allegedly had trouble authenticating them. So this got picked up and aggregated at a bunch of places. A Nice Kick, Hypebeast, Sneaker Freaker. A lot of them said some nice things about me. They credited me, linked back to the tweet. Thank you to everyone who gave credit and said nice things about me and said that I'm well known and well respected, that I'm credible. I appreciate it. I know your readers are basically looking for, is this a credible person saying this? So I appreciate you giving me that rub. And really, when I was tweeting this, I was trying to be careful of protecting the reseller's identity. I didn't know how out there he wanted to be, if it was against certain rules or whatever. I'm just trying to get some tweets off. Most of the times it's jokes, but this one was at least informative. I didn't even want to say it was 38 out of 60-ish because I figured if I gave the exact number, people would figure it out and put 2 and 2 together from people who had saw his viral Instagram post. And some people did, and his name was a bit out there, and I was just trying to be careful about it. But the reseller, he told me that he was also talking to Brendan Dunn the next day. And I laughed and said, the same guy who called you a snitch? And he said, yeah, he's going to ask him about it. So I don't know who or how Brendan Dunn got in touch with him or who reached out first. All I know is I knew this guy from having talked to him in the past by me just being a person in the community who talks to people. But really, I just laughed because I knew my tweet about it was going to ruin Dunn's story. It was like the meme, the guy, you're ruining it. That's what I was doing. I was ruining it. And look, if Dunn hadn't said fuck that guy about me and was friendly to me, I probably would have talked to him about it directly. But he's not, so here I am, ruining it. So 4 days later, here's Brendan Dunn finally posts his interview with the same reseller, the same guy he called a snitch. He's now interviewing. Like I said, I had 4 days of satisfaction of knowing that I basically ruined this guy's story. In the interview, the reseller in question gives more details about how or why and what he could talk about. But really, I'd already gave away the headline of which sneakers were involved. And people started tagging me and saying, hey, Brendan Dunn undercut your tweet and didn't even give you credit. And I was not undercut at all. I was ruining it. I didn't expect credit from him. It wasn't about credit if he was the one who got scooped by me. He sees or hears everything and was probably pissed that the main hook for a story is already out there. So honestly, I had a great time ruining it. It was all very satisfying to me. I didn't have to call anyone a snitch. I did the opposite. I tried to protect his identity. It was just me, once again, scooping this guy like I did with Zeta Kicks, like I did with other stories that aren't directly spoon-fed to him from Nike. He's a pro, I'm a casual. I don't even work on scoops. I would do more jokes or thoughts and analysis and stuff here. But this is not about my war with ball sack sneakers or anything. You know, I'm not looking at you dudes. I'm looking past you. I more just wanted to give some background about how I found out and how I heard and how different it was from how they heard and how they reported it. So ultimately, it doesn't matter that much. I just had some fun. But once again, these guys got outworked by a casual who took them to the paint.
Oh, man. You're just ruining it. Look at my lips. You're ruining it.
Some odds and ends and shorter topics. We saw that the Mac attacks are releasing from Social Status. There were 3 pairs that leaked. And this is a shoe that originally released in 1984. I personally don't have any memory of John McEnroe playing in these. Really, my first tennis sneaker memories are from Andre Agassi wearing AirTech Challenger line in the late 80s when I was 9 or 10 years old. And I tweeted once that I was wondering if they can still call these shoes the Mac Attacks if John McEnroe isn't still with Nike, because every brand has re-released sneakers after the original endorser has left. You saw this with Kobe Adidas and even other brands like Jamal Mashburn and Fila, which are now called the MB Fila. So I was talking to Sneaker Preservation Society on Instagram, and he was saying that most likely John McEnroe is still signed with Nike on maybe like a Legends deal or something. So most likely they will still keep the McEnroe affiliation name. And Sneaker Preservation Society guy was actually the one who loaned LeBron James a pair of that very sneaker in the OG 84 version in a size 15. No clue how or where he had the sense to buy and hold a size 15 in that shoe, but he did. And the other story is Travis Scott also got a pair of those from Riff LA a few years ago. So, I don't know if Nike had an idea to re-retro these shoes and establish a trend with their biggest stars early on so that it could kind of grow organically, or if it was the reverse, if these stars said, I want this shoe, and Nike said, maybe we can bring this shoe back, and 2-3 years later, here we are with a pending release. But like I said on the last podcast, if a brand has an archive of silhouettes that people care about and they can bring them back when there's a time and place for it and that people want it, that's the recipe for success in sneakers. Another note, I saw that Joe Grondin is leaving New Balance after 10 years. If you don't know that name, he was the head of collaborations at New Balance and probably one of the key people to put New Balance back on the map, because he was the one who worked with Joe Freshgoods and Salehi and their whole roster of collaborators, I'm assuming. Amy Leon Dore too, as well as a key collaborator. But before that, New Balance was known as like this Trump supporting brand, and those are the people responsible for kind of turning it around in these last 4 years. But I bring it up because where he goes next will be really interesting. I'm assuming it's not going to be a lateral move. Like, I don't think he's going to go to like Vibram or something and work there, but I don't know. Maybe it's Nike, the market leader, or maybe it's Adidas, because Adidas could sure use him and his network for collaborations. But if he's going to a competitor, it's possible he has a non-compete clause, which means he may have to sit on the bench for a year. But I don't know if that is a thing that the bigger brands do, like Nike and Adidas, and the small brands don't. I'm not sure, but whatever his next move is, it's something to keep an eye on. Another sneaker story recently was that Adidas and Beyonce split up. I just saw that as Adidas is in need to save money mode. They're saying need gone with these collaborators that are costing them a lot of money. But it just goes to show that someone who's famous and has a huge audience does not always translate into sales at retail. A good product is still required, and these shortcuts with a key collaborator may not always work. Another story that hit the news this weekend was Kanye's flipping TV and watching 21 Jump Street, I guess. And he said that watching Jonah Hill in 21 Jump Street made him like Jewish people again. So Before that, I guess he was just sitting there, just doing and hating Jewish people, but then he's flipping channels and there's 21 Jump Street on. Is this the start of the apology tour? I don't know. I guess one Instagram post is not exactly enough, and especially one that he'll probably delete tomorrow. But, I was thinking about when Adidas cut ties with Kanye, and they did it kind of late. And it seemed like at the time they were trying to wait him out. Wait till he goes radio silent mode. Of course, they have a lot of money and product on the line, so that's another reason to wait it out as long as possible. But if Kanye just went radio silent mode like 2 to 3 weeks before he finally did, Adidas probably would have kept cranking these sneakers out and 3-4 releases a month and making tons of money. But instead, in those 3 weeks, Kanye said some horrendous stuff and they had to cut ties. I don't think one Instagram post makes an apology tour. He went out of his way to say people want him to do stuff that he doesn't want to do. And I don't think he's going to do anything that he doesn't want to do. He's literally said that, so I'm going to take his word on it. But the sneaker industry needs Kanye. Adidas needed Kanye. Retailers needed Kanye. Resellers needed Kanye. And finally, I guess the people who wear Yeezys needed Kanye. But if he does an apology tour, will he stick to it? Probably not. Can you put millions of dollars back on the line on a person who can undo it all with one outburst? It's just a tough call to make. It's just too flimsy to rely on. But America will give anyone a second chance that they like. And people like Kanye because he wrote good songs and made good sneakers at a time in their life when they needed good songs and needed good sneakers. Some supposed leaks of Jerry Lorenzo Fear of God Adidas slides and sneakers released over the last week or so. And my first thought was, we waited like 2 years for this? This is what we're waiting for? Someone in the replies said the slides look like a styrofoam plate, and then the sneakers leaked and they did not look that great at all. But I tweeted that something looked off about these samples to me. It didn't look like anything Jerry would do. So I don't know if those are very early samples or if they were fakes. What's the point of making a fake of something that hasn't released? So that's why I'm assuming it's a very early sample. Also, the leaker I've never heard of. So sometimes people have a rep for releasing stuff and it does come out. This one, I just had not heard of him before. So I don't know who he is or where he gets his stuff from. Jerry Lorenzo did put out a statement and confirm that they are not the Fear of God sneakers. He said, this is not the basketball sneaker from Fear of God at Adidas. He didn't say fake. He didn't say sample. He just said, this is not the basketball sneaker. I was talking to Brandon, previous guest on the podcast, and he was telling me that there's at least 3 SKUs and slides coming out, possibly more. And I guess Jerry in his statement did say that they are going to show them at the Fear of God show that they have at Hollywood Bowl on April 19th. So that's when we'll get our first look at them. And honestly, I'm expecting something to be good releasing, not what we saw in these samples. I kind of believe in his track record of releasing good product. Jerry even made that Nike moccasin look good. So, and like I said, good product can't be denied. And we saw with the Jason Tatum release where Jason Tatum said those are not it. And when they came out, they were exactly the same. I'm assuming Jerry is aware of that and he shouldn't be saying that if it is the same. So that's why I'm not expecting these to release in something better. But I also tweeted that I think Jerry Lorenzo and Adidas are most likely one and done. I'm saying that not from anything I've known or heard, and others have probably said the same thing as well too, and I really was just tweeting it so I can quote tweet it in the future and say, hey, look. But to give more insight into it, that was just me reading the tea leaves and making an educated guess. You look at all these delays and no releases, it's natural to assume that things have gone not as planned. His right-hand man and business guy Jason Maiden left Adidas as well too. The Adidas basketball capsule that released recently looks like it was designed by Jerry Lorenzo, but he claimed in a statement that it was not. And in that same statement, he said that he's no longer part of Adidas basketball, but has Fear of God Athletics with Adidas releasing soon. And even the photo I used in my tweet was from Jerry covering up the tattoo on the back of his neck. That's from his own Instagram back in December or so. The other sign was that Nathan Van Hook has been hired to be the VP of Adidas basketball. All that stuff we know. We know that he was working with Adidas basketball. He was going to be head of that division. And then there's a capsule that's released without his name and then he's out. If you add it up all together, it seems like whatever they have made, they're going to release. And after that, my guess is they'll say, we're one and done. Thank you. Bye. And really, African Caesar on his Sneaker Box podcast was the first to talk about this past summer. So this is my guess as to what happened. Jerry is a delicate genius. He works on his own schedule for fashion. If you look at the Fear of God releases, they don't release on the typical high fashion schedule with, the shows in Paris. He does shows and releases on his own schedule. When he feels the collection is done and ready, that's when they're going to have a show, like this one coming up on April in Hollywood Bowl. However, Adidas releases on a schedule. They have Q1 to Q2, 3, 4, all that. Being a delicate genius doesn't align with the demands of a schedule for a big brand, I'm assuming. If Adidas said, hey, we just signed you, you're slotted for Q4 2021, this is what we want, and Jerry says, no, actually this is what I want, but you mix in the pandemic and supply chain delays and stuff, say it's bumped to Q2 2022. But here we are in 2023, and that's why I said maybe there was a lot of this back and forth. Maybe there was a lot of disagreements. And that's why I say Jason Maiden, the president of Fear of God Athletics, who was brought in, probably tried to smooth it over, didn't go well, and now he's out. While all this is going on, whatever product was agreed on, that new models and new footwear was being produced and being made. And now here we are in Q2 2023, ready for it to release. So either it releases and it's a big hit and Jerry and Adidas agree to continue working together, or there's a lot of bad blood from these past few years and it's over and one and done. All right, so let's talk about Tom Sachs. If you haven't seen by now, there's an article on curb.com about how he runs his studio, how he's this eccentric, delicate genius, but also a very shitty boss and a bunch of other horrible stuff that he does. On Twitter, Kate Wagner described it as an art gitmo. There's basically two aspects to it. One, he's this, like I said, this eccentric, delicate genius who's a shitty boss, who's very demanding, yells at staff, has a bunch of eccentric rules. Everything is described as systems that has to be applied in a certain way or a certain order. His dog's food requires julienned spinach. There's a good and bad light bulb drawer. Pens have to be new but not brand new. Forks have to be dropped in unison at the end of the meal when everyone's sitting around. All the apples have to be slanted or italicized, as he's called. So far that sounds just like an eccentric artist, delicate genius stereotype. A shitty place to work, but a place where people in the art world, which is pretty tiny in New York City, and probably so many other industries, probably put up with some version of an eccentric asshole boss. But the other stuff was the horrible stuff, where he acts like an entitled asshole that abuses his power and makes working for him a living hell. He throws things at his employees. He's got a swastika on his first aid kit. He makes jokes about a room in the basement being called a rape room. And then, dismisses it as, those are all just jokes. There's an episode of Seinfeld where Jerry is offended by a Jewish joke, not because he's Jewish, but because he's offended as a comedian because it's not funny. It's just some edgelord shit that's never funny, except to the person in power who gets off on making people uncomfortable. That shit is never funny. And the more serious allegations were the ones where he's, kind of sexually harassing employees, making comments about their body or their sexual partners. There's a woman in the article who details that she's afraid to be alone with him, and also talks about how he was in a Zoom meeting with Nike in his underwear. And like I said, being eccentric is part of the draw of being a delicate genius. You got to be out there. Is he actually a genius, or is this all just some sort of deep-seated insecurity coming out in a series of systems? And one of his former manager quotes kind of summarizes it pretty succinctly, saying, quote, "It's almost as if he goes out of his way to sow discomfort and pawns it off as if he's a genius. It's like a ruse. So many people out there know that he's cruel, but the art world is tiny and no one gives a shit." End quote. So on a sneaker podcast, I'm basically interested on the sneaker aspect of it. So I'll talk about Nike and how they initially responded and wonder about how they will actually respond going forward. So they released a statement saying that they were deeply concerned by the very serious allegations and they are in contact with Tom and his studio and, quote, "seeking to better understand the situation and how these issues are being addressed," end quote. And I tweeted some of my initial thoughts on how Nike will actually respond. I said that Nike will probably stand by him, as they've done with Ja Morant or Tiger Woods. But the days of an extended Tom Sachs marketing campaign with videos and space camps are probably over for a long time. So I'll go into detail on that because on Twitter, in one single tweet, there's a lot I'm saying there, and there's kind of two separate trails of thoughts. But I'm really interested to see overall how Nike will respond, because it's harder than ever to tell how a big company will respond to things. Every case is different, but most of the time Nike will stand by you if you follow the general pattern of, PR. If you're contrite, if you make amends, you go on an apology tour, Nike will stand by you. As they probably should, as most people should, because everyone does deserve a second chance if they've changed. But that's part of the apology tour. Are you actually sorry? Do you actually realize there's a problem? Is there any rehab or counseling that you're going to do? Are you going to communicate it internally or publicly in like an apology tour? And I don't want to get into a cancel culture debate. I've said before, and I maintain that the only person who ever got canceled was Brother Nature for getting beat up in a diner. No one else has. But as I've said, the times are changing, and it's harder than ever to tell how big companies respond. Some people seem like they can do or say as they please. Others get temporarily canceled, and then they're back. I was talking to my friend Dan, and he brought up something interesting about NASA and the usage of the NASA logo by Tom Sachs. The NASA logo is not exactly public domain, but they're pretty lenient on who can use their logo, even for commercial or merchandise use. But if you're a creep and you haven't addressed it, and you're still using the NASA logo out there, NASA's probably going to have something to say about it. But let's circle back to Nike and how they responded with Ja Morant and Tiger Woods and also Kyrie Irving. And the point here is not to look at how they should respond to Tom Sachs because of how they responded to Ja Morant and Kyrie Irving, but to look for patterns in how they possibly could respond, if that makes sense. For Ja Morant, of course, they got a shoe coming out very soon, and his case involved guns and immature behavior, and they basically saying that they're going to stand by him because Ja Morant is out there making amends, apologizing for his behavior or blaming people for his behavior. But there's a lot on the line, and Ja is taking the right steps. For Tiger Woods, he was banging Waffle House waitresses in the back of a car, got into a car accident, and law enforcement was involved. Law enforcement was involved for Ja Morant as well too, but it seemed like nothing came of it. So that's one striking difference between Ja and Tiger and Tom Sachs. There is no law enforcement involved, but as it was pointed out by Nick on my Twitter, that his behavior does seem much more extreme than those two. Which kind of brings us to Kyrie. Kyrie had a lot going on with Nike. He didn't like his shoe. He's kind of this ornery guy. And of course, he posted a link to a film on Amazon where the film producer is anti-Semitic and maybe parts of the film is anti-Semitic. Kyrie himself did not say anything anti-Semitic, but handled it poorly and kind of was defensive about it because he's got that same kind of, don't tell me what to do or say, I could do what I want. And everyone inferred that because he posted a link to this movie, that he stands by this filmmaker and believes all the same thing that person does, even though Kyrie said that he doesn't. And Nike's response was, quote, "At Nike, we believe there's no place for hate speech and we condemn any form of anti-Semitism. To that end, we've made the decision to suspend our relationship with Kyrie effective immediately and will no longer launch the Kyrie 8. We are deeply saddened and disappointed by the situation and its impact on everyone," end quote. So a very different statement than the one they made for Tom Sachs, especially how they say "to that end," where they're making the same kind of inference that, hey, seems like he believes this shit, so we got to get rid of him. And Phil Knight even said this on an interview on CNBC. He said, "Kyrie stepped over the line. It's kind of that simple. He just made some statements we can't abide by, and that's why we ended the relationship," end quote. And the question is, what statements? The one where he poorly explained or didn't apologize in time? But with Kyrie and Nike, there seemed like there was a lot more going on, and they just wanted it over with, so they said, get the fuck out of here. So those are cases where, they have to deal with something with an endorser, a collaborator. You can also look at how Nike responds to their own house. Two very recent cases. One, there's this long-running sexual harassment and gender discrimination lawsuit from Nike's own employees where they detail sexism, bullying, and fear of retaliation. Some more details were reported just a couple months ago in December of 2022 by Matthew Kish of Business Insider, where he got access to some of the court documents which involved surveys from female Nike employees. And the article lists some of the things that the female employees said in these surveys. One said that she had been directed by male coworkers to dress sexier. Another identified a certain executive as being well-known philanderers with lower-level employees whom they exert influence and power over. Another said that she witnessed a male executive receiving oral sex from a lower-ranking female in the company gym. And then another alleged that sloppy drunk men embraced female coworkers or invited them to work dinners. And finally, another one said a male manager quoted saying to her, "No one gives a fuck about female empowerment." Again, this is all allegedly. This is still in the courts. Nike is fighting this case in the courts. Another case recently was Alberto Salazar, a longtime track coach who has been suspended indefinitely. He headed up the Oregon project and even had a building named after him at Nike. Originally, he was suspended in 2019 for violating anti-doping rules. At the time, Nike stood by him, even paid for his lawyers and paid for his appeal. In a letter to the appeal, one executive even said, "A 4-year suspension for someone who acted in good faith is wrong," end quote. And that executive, CEO at the time, Mark Parker. However, very soon after that, allegations came forward that there's more than just this anti-doping stuff, that there's sexual abuse and more. And the U.S. Center for Safe Sport investigated and then barred Salazar for life in the summer of 2021 and did not exactly detail why, other than to say that it was for sexual and emotional misconduct. And only months after that lifetime ban, did Nike confirm that they're renaming the building that was named after him. And very recently, like a couple of weeks ago, athlete Kara Goucher on the track team came forward and detailed the abuse she received from this coach. And another case is, which I won't go into, is how Nike disrespected Allison Felix when she was pregnant and offered her lower money while at the same time producing marketing that is all about female empowerment. So those I bring up because that's who Nike is, and that's how Nike has responded, both for ambassadors and collaborators and stuff under their own nose. But Nike is a big company. Does one hand know what the other is doing? If you haven't worked in a big company, it's really just a ton of small teams because no one works in a team of 40. They work in a team of 7 or 8. Maybe a tree is a better metaphor. If each leaf is a team, there's a bunch of leaves on a branch, and one person on a team might know what's going on one branch, but not what's going on a totally different branch. And there's more at play all the time too when you work at a place like that. Like the person who works at Nike who's in that Zoom call where Tom Sachs is in his underwear. Would they report this to their boss and that boss moves it on and then it's just silence because it's Tom Sachs? Or is it possible they don't report it at all because it's a dream working on a project of the magnitude of a Tom Sachs general purpose shoe? So that part, I don't know. What does Nike believe? Who decides on this kind of stuff? Is it the executives? Is it HR? Is it legal? Is it all of the above in a meeting? They said that they're talking to Tom to see what he's doing. Are they evaluating his apology tour? And it seems that Tom Sachs' apology tour has started, which was a letter that Tom Sachs sent to his staff, which is detailed in a New York Times columnist article this week. In that letter, he says he never tried to make anyone uncomfortable, but acknowledges that he could be impulsive and even aggressive, that he's a demanding boss, expects the best out of people, and these recent representations of him in the media do not portray the totality of his career. I mean, of course not. Tom Sachs is saying, hey, I've got hits, not the times I tried to actually hit people with stuff, but big successful art project and sneaker hits. It's like R. Kelly saying, hey, remember how we all liked Remix to Ignition? Huh? Could shave a few years off my sentence because of that? And his apology letter also says some allegations were false or misleading, but doesn't actually detail which ones those were. And also he says he sincerely regrets having referred to that room as the rape room, and he's working on improving himself and is in the midst of formalizing human resource policies. So he's making HR systems. More rules should fix his behavior. So overall, he's apologizing for the eccentric, delicate genius part, but not for the shitty behavior stuff, the more serious stuff that actually matters, the stuff that he's still most likely denying. So as I said, I don't know how Nike will respond. It's possible that they just wait it out, that this letter to his staff is enough, that they're appeased by it, that Tom Sachs is not exactly a household name, that maybe he's only known among hype beast sneakerheads and New York art types, and they could just wait for it to blow over. But for now, they got to put a pause on his drops. I'm assuming they're going to put a pause on these upcoming general purpose shoes and possibly shelved until they figure something out. If they do release, it's probably going to be very little promotion, unlike the last couple where they placed ads in the New York Times, called it boring, or these stunts where they dropped in Kohl's. And as I said, the long campaigns of wear tester stuff that he did in Sneakers app, that's probably over. What's the point of doing all that if all that stuff detailed his process and the process was all about abuse? And so finally, the question for you is, are these shoes ruined for you? If you look at the market on the apps, it's mostly unchanged. Sure, there might be people who are like, I don't want these shoes, I'm selling them off. And people are quickly buying them if they're $20 less than what they used to be. Personally, I don't know what to do. I have 2 pairs of the general purpose shoes, which are dead stock. Those I'll probably sell, but I was probably leaning to sell those in the first place even before all this. The Mars Yard 2.0 that I have, I wear those every couple months, and I don't know, I can just leave them aside separately and not think about it for now, which is probably what I'll do. And I said before, those are super hard for me to sell because harder to sell worn shoes in dead stock. 2, I don't want to ship off valuable shoes to GOAT or eBay and then get them lost in the mail. Or they do make it to those places and they're not authenticated for some random reason, and then I have to sweat them coming back to me. Nor do I want to do meetups where I'm meeting someone in a McDonald's parking lot and they want the full Carfax of the shoe. I was talking to someone on Twitter, which linked me to an article called The Picasso Problem, which detailed that Picasso was this famous misogynist and we shouldn't separate the art from the artist. And then there's the total opposite view of why we should separate the art from the artist, because a shoe is a shoe. And for you, it's a personal choice. Like, do you still listen to Kanye West or R. Kelly or Michael Jackson? Kanye saw 21 Jump Street, so that means we can all listen to Graduation again? That's how easily you can change your mind on this. Or you were listening to Graduation this whole time. But really, for Tom Sachs, his draw for sneakerheads was not his studio art gallery shit. If you want to be a weirdo, delicate genius, go do it yourself and leave others out of it. Weld that screwhead onto the quarter yourself. If you got a chainsaw engine with a dildo on it, fucking do that yourself. Do not get others involved. Be the loner, eccentric, delicate genius stereotype, not the abusive asshole artist stereotype. So for sneakerheads, it wasn't about his studio gallery art shit. It was about the sneakers that he makes. It was about an interesting artist who's got an interesting process, and at the end of this process, he produces a great product, the Mars Yard. But the man is not interesting if he's an asshole. The process is not interesting if it involves abuse, and if abuse is baked into the art. And as I've talked about sneaker taste on this podcast, taste can change based on how the product is made and who is making it. You can change your mind on a shoe just based on how it was released. Just look at Trophy Room. So with this Tom Sachs and with this shoe, it's a personal choice for you. What are you going to do? What do you think about it? For some, a shoe is a shoe. It's a product for your feet. It looks nice and it doesn't say anything or represent anything. It just represents, protecting your feet. For others, the shoe is the final product of an artist with a vision, a perfect collaboration of art and commerce. The process is the art, that if we apply discipline systems to our lives, we can learn and grow ourselves and create great things. That was the draw of Tom Sachs, his storytelling, him being interesting, and then out of that creating great product. But if that was all a mirage, does the emperor have any clothes? He literally has no clothes in the Nike meetings. So maybe it's a cop-out on my part of, not knowing what to do and just doing nothing, but I'm kind of waiting to see what he does, to see if he really is a scam, to see how he responds, how he does an apology tour, how Nike responds. But one thing that I know that you have to respond to is me telling you to go fuck yourself.